Death rides again in Darksiders II for Wii U. This port looks and runs the same as the original, and is essentially a carbon copy of the other versions, albeit with a few key differences. To start, the Wii U version includes all of the DLC that was previously sold separately, from Argyll's Tomb to the Deadly Despair Pack. You can also play using either the gamepad or the more traditional Pro controller. Being able to access menus and equip items on the fly with the touchscreen is a nice touch, and having your map handy can be a great help, but it's really a minor addition that doesn't significantly affect the overall experience. All in all, Darksiders II on Wii U is very much the same game it was on other platforms. The gamepad integration is cool, but far from game-changing. That covers the Wii U-specific features of Darksiders II. Since the Wii U editions don't really affect the quality of the original game, the score of the PS3, 360, and PC versions still stands. For everything you need to know about the game, here's our original video review. Death awaits you in Darksiders II, the latest offering from Vigil Games. Much like its predecessor, Darksiders II is an extremely derivative game, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Drawing from such incredible properties as The Legend of Zelda, God of War, and Prince of Persia could have made for a truly epic experience. Problem is, while it presents a lengthy and enjoyable adventure to hack and slash your way through, Darksiders II never comes close to reaching the heights of the games it so freely borrows from. Darksiders II takes players on a journey through heaven, hell, and everywhere in between, as Death quests to clear War's name and restore humanity. The narrative can be pretty heavy-handed at times. Don't get me wrong, it's amusing and serves as a fitting background for the gore. But in truth, it often comes off as sophomoric and just trying way too hard to sound like Lord of the Rings Goes to Hell.
I helped you once before, horseman. Look at me now. How I cursed that day. How I curse you.
As for the world itself, the game is huge. Problem is, while the freedom of running around such large areas is fantastic, there's just not enough to do in them. The frequent loot drops from the enemies you do come across and the fast travel system are great, but I couldn't help but wonder why the developers made the game so big if they weren't going to properly populate it. And while the art design and voice direction are pretty stellar, they're severely underscored by the so-so graphics. At times you'll run into textures that are so SD, you'll think you're playing on a Wii. The animations in Darksiders II are also quite choppy, and the game suffers from some rather frequent frame rate issues. But by far the biggest downside to the game is the sheer amount of random glitches. Floating, buttons that stop working, music that disappears. The game is littered with random glitches that, while short-lived, occur often enough as to greatly distract from the overall experience. Darksiders II offers fairly standard action fare, with some adventure and RPG elements thrown in for good measure. You've got a quick and deadly primary weapon, supplemented by a heavier and deadlier secondary weapon, and you chain moves together to hack and slash your way through the undead minions that stand in your way. While the enemies are a little generic, the action itself is still very fun and satisfying, and the RPG elements are a dream come true. The ability to see the stats of any piece of gear you encounter on the field and instantly equip it is amazing, and makes customizing Death with the best duds out there quick, easy, and totally addictive. Too bad much of the dungeon design leaves much to be desired. While later dungeons do a great job of shaking things up and come off as far more creative, most of them are actually pretty repetitive. Roll the ball, bomb the corruption, lather, rinse, repeat. It's possible to reuse game mechanics throughout an adventure but still change it up so it doesn't feel stale. But Darksiders II doesn't do that. One thing Darksiders II does very right is the boss fights. They're epic. You'll go up against giant monsters 100 times your size, groups of demons that put your skill to the test, and all manner of hell beasts that are just too fun to defeat. It's a shame most of the enemies are so standard when the bosses are so magnificent, but when you're in the middle of downing a behemoth with your giant hammer of death, you'll remember why you love action games to begin with. Darksiders II is a fun game with some excellent RPG elements, amazing boss fights, and an impressive scope. It's too bad that such glaring issues as prevalent glitches, a lack of puzzle or enemy variation, and subpar graphics bring the experience down. Still, if you're in the market for a fairly epic, M-rated adventure, Darksiders II offers a really fun time. For more on Darksiders II, head on over to IGN.com.